And Nick, Austin, thank you for joining us this evening and look forward to hearing your presentation. I will let you all introduce yourself and the show is yours. So thanks again.
Absolutely. Excited to be here. We are recording, so anything you say or do can and will be used against you in your comments. So just remember that as we go through DSP ritual next year or something. But this presentation is one that I know Nick and I are both extremely, one, passionate about, and two, excited to get to put together and bring to this webinar series here that Shanda has going on. If you would, I know, again, we've got a little smaller group. One thing I always love to do, and Nick also, when we start presentations, at least when they're in person, is get a pulse for the room and try to find out, like, what is it that brought you here to sign up in the first place? So if you wouldn't mind, as we kind of go through our introductions here over the next couple of slides, if you want to type a sentence or two into the chat about one thing you were hoping to take away from this presentation, Nick and I would really appreciate that information so that we make sure you're getting like the most value out of this hour of your time. I'm confident we're going to cover a lot of really good information, but if you had like something like burning thing that you want to be able to take away from this based on the description, please put that in the chat so that as we go through, we'll keep an eye on that and think, okay, like this needs to relate to this point, or we'll come back to it at the end and kind of use it to launch into our Q&A session to answer those questions for you guys. So Nick, if you want to go to the next slide, to give you all a little bit of background about myself. I'm a graduate of Indiana University. I'm a brother of the Alpha Pi chapter of Delta Sig. I pledged in spring 07. So I graduated with majors in marketing and entrepreneurship and a minor in fine arts. And over the last 10-ish years now since graduating, I've kind of had a crazy journey through starting field marketing, like the guy literally standing at Walmart on the weekends giving samples of drink away to teach about it. Then moved into sales and then got into analytics. And I'm now a business intelligence manager at the company that I work for. So if you guys are familiar with Power BI or Tableau or any of those type of platforms, basically taking a bunch of information, creating some really cool interactivity and charts for our business to be able to dissect how things are going. On top of that, in my free time, I'm also passionate about public speaking. I've had the chance now to speak, I guess it was Lead Virtual last year, then Lead Portland the fall before that, at various DSP events and actually multiple universities and companies throughout the country, speaking on the idea of discipline creating freedom. So for me, three topics that I'm really passionate about are the idea that if we can learn to use our time more effectively, manage our money more responsibly, and develop relationships more intentionally, that's where we're going to find like a sense of personal freedom that lasts. We start to really thrive in our lives. And tonight, this topic is that third pillar, developing relationships intentionally. What we're going to talk about is how do you build a network around you, whether it's in person or digitally, so that you have a professional group of people that you can go to when crazy things happen and you're looking for a job, or you're just maybe not totally satisfied with your job, or you're unsure of what to do next in your career. So that's what tonight's topic is going to be all about. And again, something that Nick has a ton of experience in terms of getting in front of and creating opportunities for himself. I'm more along the lines of, well, we both are in terms of developing kind of a personal brand, having an online presence, those types of things. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun tonight and hopefully give you guys a lot of great insights to take away and start to implement in your own kind of profiles online and in person. So Nick, go ahead and tell us about you.
Awesome. And Austin, while I'm doing this, we've already got some questions in the chat. And do me a favor and just double check your mic. It's cutting out just a tiny bit. And we want to make sure we're getting everything you've got to say, man. Guys, my name is Nick Rizzi. I went to the University of Denver. I was talking about the cold. I'm from Iowa, and I had to find some warmer weather. So I came to the state of infinite sunshine. We went to the University of Denver in the fall of 2010, and I actually got involved with our fraternity because there was a bunch of guys and gals in suits, and the temperature was, 92, 93 degrees outside. And they're sitting at a table holding a sign that said, "Hey, we'll be your friend." I was like, that sounds great. Like, I need friends. I don't know anyone here. So that's how I met the fraternity brothers of Alpha Nu. I pledged right away and I got really excited. Spent 4 years kind of building my network, and I actually ended up graduating with 13 job offers. And I also do a bit of public speaking, utilizing that, because those 13 job offers only came because of exactly what we're talking about. We had to cultivate those relationships and find those opportunities, and a lot of networking and meeting people. So we're going to talk about exactly what that means tonight. I'm particularly excited, and you guys are in for a real treat, because I have been wanting to do a presentation with Austin for years now. I think it qualifies as years now. It's been at least one, just because, yeah, it counts. Oh, that sounds better too.
Good, I'm glad.
The topics that we touch on, it's like two sides of the same, or of the same coin. So I'm really excited about it, because we're going to be talking about the application and action you take behind how to actually meet people. I used to be a startup and revenue sales manager. I did a lot for sales teams, automation, and sales copywriting inside of startups. The pandemic changed my employment status, and I'm using this opportunity to start something new. I'm actually trying to be the woodworking realtor, is a recent brand. Somebody I met this week said that would be a really cool title. So I actually have a small wood shop that I launched a few months ago, selling handmade bottles and pens, and bottle stoppers and pens and cutting boards, and love that. But real estate is really where I want to get in and start helping people find their forever home. So that's the next step.
You need to provide people a mantle. Buy a house for me and I will give you a mantle for your fireplace. Like, that should be your shtick.
That might be too big a project. Maybe. Besides, now we know Shanda's just going to use it for firewood if the power goes out. So.
Yes, that's
A
true.
pen is nice. You can give a pen or a wooden keychain.
Oh, I like those. I like those. So to start with, everyone, and you know what? Do me a favor, drop this in the chat. What is the sweetest sound in the world? If you've seen Adam Carroll speak, you've probably heard this, but if you know the answer to this, or your thought on the answer, for the human ears, what's the nicest sound that people can possibly hear? Feel free to drop it in the chat if you want to take a guess. While we're doing that, actually, you know what? Never mind. I'm just going to skip ahead, because Noelle is on top of the game. It's their own name. Their own name is the sweetest noise in the world. And I can't even tell you how powerful this is when you're networking and you're making these opportunities. There have been times, and this is scientifically backed, where I have said less than 15 words in a 2-hour conversation, and they've walked away and told the host of the event that we were at, like, wow, that Nick is super interesting. It's just like, all I asked was like, and what does that mean? And how does that relate to what you're doing? And I just kept expanding on what they're doing. And every time I did, I would throw in their name. So when you meet someone, that's got to be your number one thing. You commit their name to memory, and you want to make sure you remember them as best you can. And you throw that back during the conversation as often as you can. So Austin, it was great to meet you. What do you do, Austin? And that's an easy way to just start right off the bat. Noelle's got it, nail on the head. The sound of a person's own name is so important. And that goes back to being able to kick that back to being able to actively listen. Austin, you were asking, what advice do you have for remembering people's names? I really like that. So I met 2 people that have used really interesting ones. One person who I'll have to find their name. I saw him at a conference, gosh, must have been about 8-9 years ago now. He went through and met 50 people leading into this conference, and was able to recall all 50 people's names over 2 hours later. And what he did was he assigned somebody to an object. A good example, like, we're standing at the door and this guy in front of me walks in, and his name's Peter. And he assigns Peter to the pillar, and Nick to his knick-knack that he kept in his pocket. He had a little charm. And he just assigned objects to people that he related it to them. So when he was recalling names, he always remembered Peter Pillar, which was super interesting. And he was able to do that for 50 people. Another really great way that I personally use is I just use it as often as possible. Theoretically, and there is a study backing this, but if you can say someone's name 8 times in the first 2 minutes of meeting them, your brain is supposed to start cataloging that into long-term memory. And I do that a lot. You can couch it really easily in conversation just in the beginning. Hey, Austin, it's so great to meet you. Austin, what do you do for work? Oh, that's really cool. And Austin, do you have any family as well while you're public speaking and crushing all this professional development work? And you don't have to make it awkward as you throw their name in, but it's just so important to start that. The second best way for when you're meeting people, and you'll notice I titled the slide, Hi, I'm Awkward. I want you to lean into that. I am so envious of your position as students right now, because it is a million times easier to meet people, especially important people, as a student than when you graduate. That's also why we put that comment in the box earlier. Like, we don't want you to fall into that infinite pool of death where you just apply online and you stick your resume in their pile. We don't want that to happen to you, because you have so much opportunity to meet people, especially as a student. And I want you to use your position to do that. This is how I graduated with 13 offers. I got 1 through a job fair, and then 2 through our fraternity, through introductions. Actually, technically 4 through introductions. But I kept asking people to introduce me to others. And I literally just used these lines in emails, in phone calls, which was really hard. Like, who picks up the phone anymore to use it as a phone with their voice? It's so much easier for text and email. Yeah, I saw Macy. I saw that head nod. You're with me, right? Nobody wants to make a phone call, but it goes a long way because nobody does. So you stand out when you do. And I use lines like, I want to learn from you. What did you experience that I can learn from? And then I'm a student, a young professional, an interested human being. I just made it about them, whatever it was. And every time we had a speaker come to class, I'd send them an email. I'd get their contact. I'd send them an email. Hey, can I buy you coffee? And learn about what you did. I want to learn from your mistakes. I want to learn from your successes. Just teach me. I ended up spending $537 my senior year on coffee. Now, it was worse because I drank like foo-foo coffee. So I was getting like the double mint macchiato, extra whipped cream, like double caramel sprinkles. But it just got embarrassing when like I'd order that and they'd be like, just a black coffee. And I'd have to walk up.
Flack for that? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, all the time. Also, what probably contributed to my entire paycheck from work going to coffee. But it resulted in job offers and introductions, and it works. And I highly encourage you to maybe not order so much foo-foo coffee that costs $8 a can, but just go for coffee dates and you can get a water. But when you're offering to buy people coffee, like they want to talk with you because they want to talk. And a lot of times, like, they might take you out to lunch after, dinner later, like it'll pay itself back in spades. Austin, have you done anything like this as well? I think we've talked about this in the past.
Absolutely. And I was even going to tie in, like, Macy, one of your questions was, how do you don't know where you want to go. Where's your exact, like, still not sure which direction you want to go in, career or location wise. Like, this to me is, I knew Nick was going to touch on it, but like, again, one thing I talk about in my presentations as well is like, you have so much power, like, as a student, because people want to help. Like, even I think, Noel, it was your comment saying like, you're in the 5 to 10 year space. Like, my guess is you have enough experience. Like, you would love it if somebody who was like thinking about doing what you do wanted to sit down and talk with you, like, because we love to share our experience. More often than not, I believe, like, humans are genuinely good people who want to help other people. Yes, you will run into jerks who will ignore your emails or send like a really nasty email back. Like, let that roll off your shoulders and don't take it personally. Like, not everybody is going to be excited to talk to you. I believe most people will, especially as a student. So utilize that power. But yes, I remember even my first DSP conference that I went to as a brother. Tim Augustine was speaking. I think I was only a sophomore. And it was the How Hard Are You Knocking presentation. And we were, oh man, that might have actually been like right before the crash in 08. So things were still okay, but it was still important to like know that you were networking and getting out there to get a job. But I went up to him afterwards and I said like, hey, Tim, are you eating lunch with anybody? Can I eat lunch with you? Like at the conference, at the table. And he was like, No, like nobody ever asks me to eat lunch with them. So like I sat down and had, a 30 or 45-minute conversation with him, just one-on-one at the table, and then whoever else ended up joining us. But it's really, really easy if you can kind of get over that self-doubt and self-fear of putting yourself out there. Like it's a big part of it is having the confidence to ask. But I'm confident again that most people, if they are far enough along in their career, or like again, just like genuinely good person at heart, they're going to try to offer in some way or another, even if they can't help. It's like, oh, do you have anybody else you work with who would be able to give me 15 or 20 minutes of their time? I'm trying to navigate my way through things and make sure I start myself in the right direction in my career. So that's kind of my long-winded answer of summing up what I would say about that topic too.
Yeah, and there's so many creative ways to do it. And I think the biggest takeaway from your story is no one's ever asked him that before. Like you'd be amazed the advantage that you get just because nobody's done it yet. Students never ask to buy professionals coffee because we know you're broke. Most of them wouldn't let me buy them coffee. We know you're broke. It's hugely flattering when you offer that. Like, of course, I'll give you my time. The time is my more precious resource than money. Whereas we recognize that it's reverse in a lot of cases. And Jamie, I do want to address your question as well. Like this absolutely applies well into after you've graduated, well into your professional career. You would lean much more on that young professional or interested human being. People love to talk about themselves. And there's a couple of tips. If you want to contact me afterwards, I'm happy to tailor this to your specific position. But in general, like especially after you guys graduate, the two biggest rules, and Jamie, not all of this may apply to you, but the two biggest rules with networking is you should always be doing it and you should start way before you need it. And like my personal example is I go to 2 networking groups a week, even before all of this. I'm a volunteer in Delta Sig. I'm the Rocky Mountain RVP. And I always try and meet my brothers and meet new things and people there. I'm always trying to connect people and help. And I'm in Toastmasters because I wanted to be a public speaker as well. And I really got into Toastmasters. And when I was let go last year, before I started this new journey towards real estate and woodworking, I ended up having 2 interviews scheduled the same afternoon that I got let go, simply because I reached out to people that I knew, not even super well, but that I knew within DSP and in Toastmasters, that I was like, hey, like, we have a decent understanding of each other. You know who I am as a person. I'd love to learn more about your story and maybe you can keep an eye out for me. And they responded because Austin's right. Like people are generally good people. Some people are jerks and may not answer, but generally they want to help. And we were able to get connected that way right away. Last but not least with this is if you can achieve number two is the hardest because it's going to be the hardest and the easiest. It's the hardest because it's really difficult to put yourself out there, and we recognize that. It's the easiest because so few people do it, that when you do, you get that time and attention almost immediately. I've spoken to about 10,000 students since 2012 when I started speaking, even in school. 10,000 students, and I can count, well, actually now it's on my toes. I can count on my fingers and 1 foot how many people have reached out to me afterwards. And like, it's an open invitation. I'll give you hours of my time. I'll connect you to anyone you want, but like, I'm not going to email you after this presentation. I'll email you back. I'm not going to start it. So you have to follow through with, once you have that connection, you got to set a next step. And that might be a thank you note or intent with a purpose. We've got some stories coming up in other things that you can do with this and how you can drive action through these, but you make sure that you either go with like an ask or a next step. Can we meet? Can I hear your story? Can you take a look at what I've got going on and tell me how I can improve? Can you look at my resume? Can you connect me with someone that I see on LinkedIn? Like, it's okay to ask as long as you've earned that rapport, which you'll earn just by sending that email. Send a nice thank you note. Don't start the email, hey, I need this from you. Say, hey, I really enjoyed your talk. I need this from you. That's the order. And when you do that, and you have that purpose, that next step, that's how you start to facilitate the conversation and how you start to facilitate a relationship. We're going to launch a poll. I'm super interested. Shanda, if you don't mind bringing up our poll number 1, we're really interested in your thoughts on this. This should have popped up on your screen, and I'm going to pass it to Austin to talk a little bit more about content in your professional life.
So the first kind of part of Nick talking about would apply a lot to like an in-person. So you're trying to develop that network, whether it's now a digital coffee or a one-on-one coffee or a lunch or whatever the case may be. The next thing we need to talk about though is kind of to Nick's point, you've got to build something probably months or years in advance before you need it. And that also includes having a digital presence, a digital network, an ability to develop your own, what's the word I'm looking for, brand, so that people know who you are on a broader basis, so that when you do go to ask for something, like Nick knew people in person from Toastmasters and DSP who he was able to get connections with, but you would also have people who kind of start to see what you're posting online, want to follow you, understand what you're all about, and be willing to help when the time comes. So if we want to, so we got primarily here, how do you make professional content? Great, that's where we are, wonderful. We can stop sharing the results and move on to the next slide. Thank you for answering those. So the question then is, how do you create this digital persona? What does it mean to have that in your repertoire? And when creating content, what I want to talk through with this is, how do you create that professional content? This is a, I think 90, can be 60 to 90-minute workshop that we can do at a lead event in person. But it's all about, for me, LinkedIn. And that's where I would say to start. Like if you're trying to develop a professional network, go to LinkedIn. We could, again, talk for a really long time about what your headshot should look like, or your banner image, how to appropriately use your about section. Do go through, like LinkedIn, I think is pretty good, where it says, you know, your profile is, you know, missing this. Like, go through that and take time to fill those things out. Look through your network and read through different people's descriptions and about sections and see which ones like resonate with you, and try to figure out why does that sound different than just restating my resume in paragraph form. Like, that's not how you want to use, you know, a platform like LinkedIn. So once you have that foundation of your portfolio, your profile built, then you've got to think about, okay, well, what am I sharing that's adding value to this? What am I sharing that's building my brand? So the first thing you want to do is figure out, well, what's relevant to you. So you get to spend some time thinking, like, well, who am I? You know, what season am I in? What job am I trying to get? What industry do I want to be in? Where am I trying to go with my professional career? Now, granted, you may not exactly know, but you could probably start with some high level stuff and just create something, even if it's once a week, just to have a post or to share an article that you found. So being relevant to you needs to really reflect who you are as a person. When I look at that for myself, I usually post about, I would say, 4 things. So based on my speaking, because I kind of try to manage both through LinkedIn, or share both through LinkedIn, I would share ideas about time, money, or relationship management. I always use a hashtag designed for discipline, which is kind of my like summed up topic. To my knowledge, like the only person in the world who uses hashtag designed for discipline, except for one other guy who used it in the same context, who's followed me for a while, a couple weeks ago. So you could even come up with a hashtag that's specific to you. You know, there's one guy I found who last year he committed to posting 365 days out of the year. So each of his hashtags, like day 1 out of 365, day 2 out of 365, day 4, etc. So come up with something that's unique to you that way. So if somebody clicks on it, it's kind of an easy way to aggregate all of the things that you've posted in a single click. And then they can also see what you're all about on a historical perspective. But besides that, for like the speaking topics, I also, just because of my data background, I'll share, you know, Excel tips and tricks, or updates on Power BI that I'm excited about, things I'm designing at work for new reports and what they look like with the layouts, etc. So it's always something that's relevant to who I am as a person. And what this does over the course of time is start to build that character. I can tell you, I had my previous role, I was in sales down in the Carolinas, and we're distributed by Coca-Cola. So the bottler down there is one of the largest in the country. They have like, I don't know, 10,000 employees or something across 13 states. And the people that I worked with, once I moved out of my sales role into the analytics piece, would still ask my coworkers who were in the sales side, whenever they saw me, like, how's Austin, how's his speaking going? Because I had gotten to do, I spoke at TEDx Charlotte. I was able to give a TED talk there, which was awesome. And then I'm also always just posting stuff on LinkedIn about speaking and public speaking tips and that type of stuff. So like, people know that that is the those are the things I think about. Like as a person, this is who I am as a human being. Like I want to help people get better at managing their time, their money. Like I care about helping people become better, personal development, those types of things. And that's what people think of me, just because that's all they see. Not that I want to create a facade, but you get to share with people what's important to you, that's truly at your core, so that if someday you need something, they'll know like, oh yeah, that's right, this would be right up her alley. She'd be a great fit for this, etc. So that's what relevant to you means from a kind of starting that digital persona. The next step then is like, okay, well, that's fine, but I still have no idea what I'm supposed to post. Like, what should my content look like? So if you go to the next bullet point here, an easy acronym to remember is the chair test. And this kind of gives you buckets of what you can think about posting. You could make it challenging. I actually, oh man, what was it? 2 years ago now? It was right at the beginning of 2019. I actually spoke to the chapter at IU in Bloomington, was sitting in the Indianapolis airport, waiting for my flight home the next morning. And there was an article in USA Today about millennials and relying on their parents for finances. And there was one sentence in the summary that said something to the extent of like, they can't afford the lifestyle they want, so they're borrowing from their parents. And I read that and I was like, that doesn't make sense. So my comment on LinkedIn was, if you can't afford your lifestyle, shouldn't you maybe adjust your lifestyle? That was the question that I asked. It just so happened that the hashtag I used of personal finance or whatever it was got picked up by like LinkedIn news article sweep, ended up having almost 300,000 views on the article, some really supportive comments, some people who thought I was woefully ignorant and just like totally oblivious to the financial situation in the US. It's not that I was like trying to point a finger at people. It was just kind of asking the question, like, if you can't afford your lifestyle, shouldn't you maybe adjust your lifestyle for a little while for personal finances? So you can kind of challenge people with the things that you want them to think about. It can be helpful. Again, some tip, trick, something you've learned. As a student, you could create content about, hey, we're going through this project and, here's this one thing that I learned. And maybe most of your network on LinkedIn at first is other students. So then you kind of start to be a thought leader amongst your peers, or you're talking about the things that you're learning in your projects and how they maybe relate to your professional development. So then a recruiter is looking at your profile and saying like, oh, she's learning these things, she's applying these skills. This would be good for, the professional world that she's going to enter into here. Excuse me. Amusing, there are people who are funny on LinkedIn. I would say don't try to be a stand-up comedian all the time. But there's a guy on Power BI who every like couple days he posts a meme about Power BI, which sounds ridiculous, but they are funny and I find them humorous because I love it. Interesting could just be fun facts. Relevant, again, could be the timing with what's going on in the news, or again, just relevant to who you are as a person. So as you think about these different buckets, it maybe helps open your mind up to like, okay, here's how I could post this. This would hopefully get some sort of reaction from people and align with who I am as a person. And then lastly, which is probably the biggest challenge too for point number 3, if you want to go to the next bullet there, is to make sure that you're using varying media forms. This can feel really scary. I put video first because I think video is really important. It feels super self-conscious to have to record yourself on video. I actually posted a tip you should go check on LinkedIn about how to do video more effectively and get better at it over the course of time. But you could also just do a text post. You could actually share a document on LinkedIn. You can share a PowerPoint slide where if you have, 5 takeaways I had from my, mission trip to Belize, once we can all travel to Belize again. And then people can scroll through the PDF or the PowerPoint right there in LinkedIn to look at stuff. You can add a link to something, a photo. You can reshare other people's content. Just make sure you're kind of tagging them back as like a courtesy. And then also the algorithm information I last saw was that 3 hashtags are usually like the sweet spot. And of course, in terms of building a network, if there are people who you're connected to, but maybe you're not super close with, but you think it's a topic they'd be interested in, you could tag them and just be like, hey, Nick, would love to get your opinion on this thing. I did this recently with kind of my annual goal setting back in January with a few people who I think are really intentional leaders in the industries that they're in, and was able to kind of start some dialogue with them just so they know like, hey, I'm thinking about you. Like, this is what I think of you as a person, the topics that you would contribute to. So it's a really unique way to be able to bring people into a conversation that you think is important and to try to get to know them a little bit on that level. So I'll pause there. I think we have a couple of questions about this.
Yeah. And Austin, you've got a
Yeah.
great one from Noelle and Nikki. And while you're reading those and answering that, I just want to state for everyone here, like, we know a lot of this is intimidating. We're giving you the how because you ask for the how. Whenever we talk about this, it's always like, how do we do this? Well, here's the answer. Screenshot this, email us for the slides. Like, this is the how. But the point of all of this is, if you just do something, it's going to put you ahead of a lot of your peers who are just not doing anything. And better to do something and fail than to get paralyzed and not do anything at all and get lost.
Agreed. So the first question, Noelle, I would say having the professional and hobby work both being part of my digital persona. For me, I do struggle with it sometimes. And currently, I've worked now for almost 10 years for a company that when I started, I was like the 8th employee. Last January, a year ago, we got acquired by Coca-Cola. So we have grown exponentially in the last decade. So we're a very entrepreneurial, like minded company and spirited company. I'm also, again, like to plug other workshops I do, like from a time management perspective, I go through in the workshop, like I'll be honest with you, I am super diligent, 8 to 5. Like my job is my job. I have a contract with them. They're paying me to work 40 hours a week. My personal moral belief is that if I'm not doing that 40 hours a week, I'm stealing from them. So I have to find time for my hobbies either before or after work. So I usually build my speaking business between the hours of 5 and 7 a.m. or like 9 and 11 p.m. So I have been okay and comfortable with sharing them both together because I don't feel guilt about like one is stealing from the other. I just posted on Monday, actually, I'm like hosting my first webinar, like as my own through my website. Like, you can buy a ticket through my website, but it's at 7 p.m. Central. So, or 6 p.m. Central. So like it's after work hours. HR can't get mad at me for having a hobby. I could go drive for Uber too at 6 p.m., but I'm choosing to try to host a webinar instead. If they're mad about one, then they should be mad about the other as well, but they can't be. So to some extent, it just kind of depends, I think, on how comfortable you are with things, or if you feel there's much of a crossover too, because I also, from a speaking perspective, would love to go speak on behalf of my company at business intelligence conferences. So I would love to marry the two together and be able to tie them into the same thing. So I see a lot of overlap into how they could benefit each other as well. For Nikki, asking about creating a separate social media account for professional only on Instagram or Facebook. Again, I guess kind of depends on what you're posting personally on Instagram or Facebook. In my opinion, LinkedIn is very much like, I keep it professional. I'll maybe post a picture of like my family on the 4th of July and be like, happy 4th of July, like, just because I think it helps people see who you are as a person. But Instagram, I'm much more likely to post just like everyday life things that I'm also not embarrassed for, a decision maker at a university to see if they were to go to my social media account, because they're also there going to see if I use Instagram, which I don't really that much. They'll see the equivalent post across both mediums, LinkedIn and Instagram, but they'll also get more context of who I am as a human being on the Instagram side, because that platform to me is more suited for like, man, I freaking love donuts, and I'll post pictures about donuts and cold brew coffee on Instagram way more than I will on LinkedIn. So it just kind of depends on how, again, you want to build your personal persona. Hope that helps. So you can comment there too if like that was a terrible answer.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to think about too is, oh, I'm so sorry. Say that again. I didn't mean to speak over you.
I was just saying thank you. It helped a lot.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
Good. And that's what we're here for, Nikki. And the other thing to think about this too is like, it's hard to maintain 2 profiles.
Yes.
I mean, you guys have enough. I'm sure it's easier for some more than others, but it's hard enough to do one profile on multiple platforms between Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat. Like, that's hard. Can you imagine adding a duplicate on top of all of that? It's way easier just to do what Austin's
pictures
describing.
of your dog, not necessary.
Yeah. Although that being said, we do have an 8,000 following count on our dog's profile. She's kind of an Instagram star.
Oh my goodness.
But I guess in exchange, my partner does not have her own Instagram. We only have the dog's Instagram.
That's fine. That's fine. Zach, good question. I think it's up to you. Like, how much time do you want to invest in stuff? Like, I don't use Facebook. I many years ago got burned out on Facebook because I felt like it was all my friends just complaining about things they weren't happy about in life, and there was no reason for me to like want to read that and feel like maybe my feed was just, I don't know, polluted. So it depends on where you want to be. Like, I think they will look, but if you also don't have a profile, I don't think companies ding you because it's like, I couldn't find any dirt on him. He must be a terrible person. Like, that's not going to happen either. So it just kind of depends on what you want to do and how you want to spend your time.
Awesome.
One thing you can do eventually, or even you can do it now to start, would be a great way to do it, is if you Google LinkedIn Social Selling Index, there's, as a note, there's like a paid option, but you can also get your free score. Don't do the paid option. So this is a tool that LinkedIn provides that grades you on 4 categories. It's your personal brand, or sorry, professional brand, finding the right people, engaging with insights, and building relationships. So with that, you could log in, see where you are now, spend the next month commenting intentionally on 5 posts every day, or doing 1 post per week and tagging people who you think would be relevant to the conversation, whatever the case may be, and see what that does to your index. This again is me being pretty intentional with things on a regular basis, and it also depends too on some of the industry that you're in. I think it had me, I forget what industry this is based on, versus like speaking or coaching or something like that. So this is just a tool as a gauge to let you know how effective the work is that you're putting into it, so that you can know what's working and where you could tweak some ideas.
And Austin showed this to me when we were sitting down to do this. And I thought this was so cool because it's a way to actually measure the output of your efforts. But there's so much that you can do on LinkedIn. And this will be a way, if you're one of those analytics nerds, like this is a way for you to see, is this working?
Yeah.
Awesome. Anything else on this, Austin?
Nope.
Guys, any other questions for Austin? You can drop them in the chat now, or if you think of them afterwards too, we're leaving some time at the end to go over more Q&A. So don't worry if we move past and you're like, I wanted to know this. We got you. This one's my favorite. The faking preparedness by being prepped. Like, this is huge because this is going to be the difference between a cold encounter. So I've got a sales background. You'll see I use a lot of sales terminology. I never wanted to be sales, but I've learned that doesn't matter what position you want in life. You could be an accountant. You still have to have sales be your #1 skill set. And then your professional activities be whatever your purpose, your business career is. But this is the difference between a cold introduction going really well, and they're now in your pocket as a networked individual, as someone who will speak to you again, and them forgetting who you are, not being able to use that sweetest sound, and you going away forever. You have to be prepared, and that starts with purpose. So no matter what you do, it has to have purpose. And Shanda, while I'm doing this, if you don't mind launching our second poll, every conversation you do, every contact point you make, every email that you send, you have to know what you want out of it. Now, Shanda, thank you. Just put up a poll, and I'm really curious on what you guys think the most important thing that you need for an interview in. This is, overwhelming. You guys already have the answer, but you'd be really surprised because I've asked this question in other contexts, and I've gotten dress clothes as the #1 thing. In my opinion, it's better you show up in shorts and a t-shirt and have the most engaging conversation of that person's day than a 3-piece beautiful suit. And they ask like, oh, what do you want to know? And you say, nothing, I'm good. We've got a couple of stories here. Austin's got a really powerful one we're going to share. I've got another one in just a moment, but I have, when I was hiring people and we worked for a startup, I was unfortunately doing way more than 40 hours a week. There was just an enormous amount of things to do. And when it came time to expand and I was hiring people, which I was doing at like 24, which was terrifying, and a lot of it didn't know what I was doing. My boss said, like, first and foremost, narrow it down by your gut and who you want to work with. And then I will help you pick out the people most qualified. And one of the ways that I did that is they got the interview if they had Delta Sigma Pi on their resume, of course. And that gave them the interview. And then if their resume looked good, like, we'd give them the interview. And we interviewed almost everyone that applied. They would get the call back if I remembered them after the interview. And that was namely around like, what did you want to know about me? We're a startup that was figuring out what we're doing. And if you came in and you didn't have any questions, then that was a really bad sign, because I have questions every day, and I had been working there for 18 months, like 50 hours a week, and I still have questions about what we're doing. That's terrible if you don't. So that was huge. You got to go in with purpose and follow up and intent. And this is the easiest way to do that. So questions for your interviewer, that's the number one thing. In fact, whenever you're meeting someone, never hold a meeting, ask an introduction, or go to an interview without a list of what you want to know ready. And this does not have to be big. A lot of times, an unfortunate amount of times that I should not be admitting on recording, I have literally Googled things 15 minutes before my interview just to get ready. Don't do that. I recommend doing it way more in advance. Be more prepared than I have been. But that still can give you a huge advantage. The best phrase when you're getting ready for a meeting or an interview is company in the news. Google already knows this. A lot of them even have sites like news.target, news.google. Actually, I can't remember if that's Google's. But a lot of them already have like a press release page that you can find very easily. It's usually under press release or press on their website itself. But one of my favorite stories happened in college, where I had Googled half an hour before I needed to leave for my Target interview. I was interviewing to be a Target ambassador, which is a really competitive program, at least in Colorado. And this ended up being my first job offer. But I was Googling Target in the news, and the top result was that morning, Target corporate had announced that they're replacing tiles in most of their stores because this new tile surface was reflective of the LED lights in the ceiling. And they were supposed to be able to dim the lights by like 15 or 20%, saving hundreds of thousands of dollars in energy. But the store would remain the bright, well-lit Target that we love to take long walks down because of these tiles, and the tiles would reflect it. So I Googled that and I saw the article. And to be honest, I didn't even read the entire article. I just literally read the headlines. And I go to this interview, and it was with the regional store manager. So she had actually oversaw most of the stores in Colorado. And this was, I think, my third interview. I think it was either the final one or almost the final one before they made hiring decisions. And it's supposed to be a 30-minute interview. And I went in and we talked about her property management business, which I found because I just pulled up her LinkedIn. And then when she was asking, she's like, what questions do you have about Target? And I was like, well, I have some about, my position, because I came prepped with those. But right now, I read a really interesting article today about how corporate is having you replace the tiling in your store for lights. How's that going to affect all the stores that you manage? Do you have to shut that down? So she stops and she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And she pulled up her email, and it was an announcement that she had not read. So I knew it before she did. And we ended up talking about store operations. And I was in there for almost 2 hours. It was about an hour and 45 minutes. It was supposed to be a 30-minute interview. I walked out, and the guy who was interviewing after me, he just I walk out, and he's just pale. All the blood's gone from his face. Because he's like, this is not, I guess she was late for that interview. He's like, this is not going to go well. Which I feel terrible for that guy, but I got the job, and that's what I want to pass on. I'm going to read some questions that we got. And while I'm doing that, Austin had an awesome story with this as well, as far as being prepared and getting set. So I want to turn it to him.
Yeah, once you've developed your network, the hope would be, just as kind of like a second step or things to consider, is that you also are finding for yourself a mentor. As you develop your network, it's not just about like knowing people in places and having things, but also having people that you can go to on at least a semi-consistent basis, and who you're staying in touch with, who can help you professionally or maybe even personally, depending on the extent of the relationship or what it is. So even in the last couple of weeks, I've had this year, going through the end of year reviews last year, some of the feedback I've gotten in work is that in order to like progress in my professional career, the company wants to see me apply a more obvious or more examples of strategic thinking skills. And long story short, thought we'll talk about how to develop those and prove them out later on paper. But I just felt like, okay, I've missed the mark somewhere. I haven't done it right in order to make sure that, HR is capturing the efforts that I'm trying to put forward. So I reached out to a mentor of mine, and I just said, hey, I'd love to have a conversation around strategic thinking. And she picked up the phone, started talking to me. I just said, like, here's the feedback I got. This sounds like a ridiculous question, but how do you think strategically, or like prove that you know how to think strategically? And she is, extremely seasoned and well-versed in the business world. And we talked for 20 plus minutes. Like, she was asking questions. Well, what are you doing? How have you done these things in the past? What does this look like? Trying to understand the situation, but then also provided, insights and feedback on how to get better at that, so that I could grow professionally where I wanted and try to get, that next promotion or whatever I was trying to work towards. So when you talk about like knowing what you want to ask, that also goes a step further into like, even if you just want to have a one topic conversation for 30 minutes with somebody, that's okay, because it could be like a pretty deep, important conversation. Once you get to that more kind of mentorship, like, hey, I've got this big thing I want to try to get off my chest and figure out, and I trust you to be able to try to help guide me in that direction. So just another example of how to make sure that you're prepared and have purpose before you walk into these conversations. So that person doesn't feel like you've maybe wasted their time, so to speak. Because again, we want to feel like we're helping others. Your mentor wants to feel like they're helping you and providing value. So when you go with a specific topic you want to talk about and you go in depth about it, it's a good thing for that person to be able to share that information.
Yeah, and I keep using interviews as an example, but Jamie, you had mentioned earlier how you're coming up on this crossroads. That's the position I'm in now. I don't use this the most during interviews. Currently, I've been using it to try and figure out like, what are my next steps? It's how I discovered I wanted to go on and do real estate, because I was going out and I was meeting people, and I was like, hey, that person sounds really interesting. And I went up to her and I said, what's your story? Like, how did you get into this? How did you know you liked it? Can I learn from you? And if they said yes and got that meeting, then I went on and I prepped for what I wanted to know from them. And a lot of that is just like, look, here's my super quick, super fast background. And here's exactly what I want to know. And what I want to know is like, I like helping people in sales. I don't like all the cold calling metrics and the stuff that I have to do behind that. So how does that relate to what you do? And do you feel like your role is a sales job? And I was asking questions like that to realtors, because that's how I got really excited about it. I'm like, this is selling and helping people without the stuff I don't like. So, although everything's going to have a little bit you don't like, but it's all about like, know what you want to get out of it. And Austin wanted to get out of it, like, tell me what you did to think strategically so that I can be somebody who's seen as a strategic thinker. And that's something that you can use every step of the way. Macy, you had asked about questions and like when, excuse me, when it's best to ask, if they're dispersed throughout or if it's better at the end. Go with the flow every time. Whatever's most natural is what's most important. So I've had interviews and I've had situations where they just would not shut up, and like, that's great. Write that down, keep them talking. The more they talk, the better you win. And at the end is when we'd have to try and do questions, and I've had to like cross out all my questions because we only have 4 minutes left and they're on a schedule. You got to be respectful of their time. Usually it goes better if you can disperse it throughout, but it's going to change so much on each and every person. So go with whatever's natural, whatever the flow is. Okay, Austin, what tools do we have to do this stuff?
Yes, absolutely. First one is something you can download for free from austinbristow.com/resources. And again, mentor showed this to me, called the Power 25. And really you could make it a Power 50, Power 100, Power 200, whatever you want to do. It's simply a network tracking mechanism. The goal here is, if you download it, it kind of has buckets for you where you have like personal contacts, maybe people that you want to stay close to in your personal life that are just important to you as friends or family or whoever. Then you've got industry specific or maybe professors. You can break them out however you want. But the goal here is that you type that person's name in, and the hope is that, I think the way that I programmed it, based on the last contact column there, is that you would contact them once every 3 months. So you create for yourself a schedule where it's either once a week or maybe it's every morning, every day, depending on how many people you want to maintain. You're trying to reach out and do something to stay in touch with this person 4 times a year. I like to write in the birthday, because a birthday is an easy time to write in and say happy birthday to someone. If you're close enough, get their address and maybe send them a card around the holidays. Just again, that's 2 easy wins. With social media being what it is, you could always comment or engage with them online. but you kind of keep track of where they are, who they're with as a company, and then the last date that you contacted them. Once that 3-month period has passed, it's going to highlight red and tell you like, hey, time to get back in touch with this person, so that you don't fall off their radar. Not that you want to be able to just ask all the time, but even just to stay in touch and kind of keep yourself top of mind with them. If you're unsure of how to do this on a regular basis, you can click the button for the next image here. An easy way to do it is to actually create an email list update. And this is something that I do for my speaking. A couple of years ago, when I decided I kind of just wanted to try and do this thing and make it happen, I emailed as many friends and family and professional contacts who I thought would be interested as I could. And first it was for my Gmail, and I just said like, hey, I'm starting this journey. If you want to follow along with what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, tips and tricks that I'm learning, ways that I'm failing, will you sign up for my newsletter through MailChimp? So that way it's like an official thing. I know anybody who signed up actually wants to be there getting that information. So I can go into MailChimp, and I now have a subset of people who specifically want to hear about my speaking journey. And with that, I can send them updates, once a quarter. It's like, hey, here are the wins that I've got. Here are the things I'm struggling with. This is the direction I want to go. Do you by chance know anybody in this industry? And it's an easy way for people to read it. I'm like, oh, shoot, yeah, I could connect Austin with 3 people, and they're at least warm leads for him to go, try to get a new speaking event. So something as simple as that, because it's free, is also an easy way as you're trying to go through maybe college or your career or deciphering what it is you're doing professionally. You can create a list that way, that it's an easy way to stay in touch with your professional network as well. So that's kind of two tips you can use, or 2 tools you can use rather, to try to stay on top of your network development and make sure that it's not stagnant.
Yeah, and one thing that I love with both of these is, especially if you're applying at any stage of your career to work, if you get experience with email list updates and you can get good with consistency and sending this out, and quote open rates and engagement rates. I mean, even if it's your family, that's huge if you can go into an interview and talk about that, because this is exactly how companies operate. 90% of all companies operate, even non-e-commerce companies operate off mail lists. And that's huge. Because they need that engagement. So if you're able to go in and talk that you're familiar with it, because like I said, I mean, doesn't matter what your technical position is, you got to be a salesperson first and foremost, sell yourself so that they know how great you are. That's a really big deal if you can go in and talk about like, hey, I've been doing this for 2 years. Like I signed up for yours. I've got some tips, I've got something that maybe can help. I'm really curious how you use this, and you can bring that up in those conversations. I've used that to meet people on marketing teams when I wanted to get connected with them, and it's awesome. And this is also why I love doing this with Austin too, because I feel like we just complement each other so well. Like this is something I myself do not do very well that I want to get better at, because I see its value, because I see how great it is.
Make each other better. That's why we're here.
It's what we do, brothers, man. Guys, this was amazing. We've got a few minutes left. Please use the chat box or turn off mute and come online. We'd love to see you. I'll leave this up if you want to connect with us on any of our profiles. You're welcome to connect with us on LinkedIn, on our emails. We'd love to speak with you. And actually on Austin's LinkedIn point, see these, make sure you have these because your profile used to not do it by default. Make sure you sign up for your /custom URL because by default, it's like a weird string of numbers. So that makes your resume easier and nicer. Ernie, I got you, man. Yeah, you can do that on your profile page on LinkedIn, but absolutely make sure you do it because it's universal. LinkedIn.com/in/your URL makes it real easy to get there. What else do we have, guys? What else can we answer?
Changing mine to match my email handle was like my best day. I felt so professional with everything matching. Macy G. Abear. It was nice.
Heck yes.
There you go.
That's awesome, Macy.
Yeah, I was telling Nick, I've had to fight with a guy who does videography for skateboarders, also named Austin Bristow. So we challenge each other between Twitter and Instagram to get the same handle names or not. But you may have to play a little bit with which handle you're able to get for your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, that's all of mine is Ask Nick Rizzi because LinkedIn was the only one I was able to get. This guy, he was there when the internet started. He claimed Twitter as their 1,000th account, and he had the Nick Rizzi Twitter handle. I was like, dang it, there's no way. There's no way.
Early adopter, man. Cool. Any other questions? Things you guys want to know? No, we nailed it.
Nice. 100% first try,
5-star
Austin.
ratings. I love it.
Air 5.
You did great.
This was outstanding, guys. I really appreciate it. Like 5 stars across the board.
Cool. Thank you so much, Noel.
Thanks, Noel. You guys want to meet people like Noel, Jamie Ball, Jamie, also on this, our alumni. These are great people to connect with afterwards as well. And they're always at every event too.
Great.
I just
Well,
realized we have
any
Jamie
last
Pope and Jamie Ball.
questions? Well,
Ernie put one in the chat, guys.
Oh, thanks, Ernie. I appreciate that, Noel. You think you'd be able to use these networking skills to get your foot in the door when it comes into getting into an MBA program? Ernie, not only do I think you can, I am proof you can. So I have, when I have to hit 10 years for their executive program, but I already know most of the professors and all of the program coordinators for DU's, University of Denver's executive MBA, because I was really interested in seeing what this looked like. And I absolutely think that one's a slam dunk because they want you and your money. So when you approach them and say, hey, I'm really interested in learning more about your story, can we connect? That's huge because they get really excited. They want that engagement. They want you to look at their school. They want you to check it out. And then you get all of that back and forth. It might not guarantee an admission, but it absolutely gets a head start for sure. Nice. Which grad schools? Maybe we know people there.
Yeah, it's in California since I'm from the Taukai chapter at UC Merced. So some of the schools I'm looking into is like Cal State Northridge. Because I know there's a chapter there, but there's Cal State Northridge. I'm applying to what do you call it? I'm looking to like maybe Cal Poly San Luis Obispo or Cal Poly Pomona, and then maybe Cal State Long Beach, and as well as Fresno State.
We have chapters at all of those, I do believe.
Every single one. And I think
Yes.
Carly Harrow, I don't know which. Oh yeah, and Jamie's DD at Cal State Northridge. So connect with Jamie in the chat right now before this ends, or send me an email and I'll connect you too. And Carly Harrow, I can't remember which school she went to, but I think it was one that you listed. I know it's out there. And she just finished her master's program. I'm happy to connect you with as well. She's a DD there as well. So yeah, we could absolutely use the brotherhood, get connected, man. We can get you there.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. And thanks for Shanda for organizing this, getting this set, and all the work she's putting on to get these hosted for us for this weekend and the near future. So thank you, Shanda.
Absolutely. Well, thanks. Well, everyone, thank you. If there's no more questions, I suspect people are getting ready for bed in some parts of the country, maybe not California, but those out east are, the news is coming on and it's time to be done. So thank you all. We will be sending out a survey in the next couple of days. Fill that out so we can share that with Nick and Austin, and also look for other topics that we can include in our future webinars. We did just release the second quarter of the year webinar schedule. So take a look on the dsp.org calendar when you have an opportunity. I don't think registration is quite available for most of those yet, but you can at least get a save the date on your calendars. So Nick, Austin, thank you. Great job. We so appreciate it. And
Thank you.
we'll see everybody again soon.
Awesome. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Great work.